Hey guys, what's up? It's Crumb, and welcome to part 6 of things only old RuneScape players will remember. In the last video, we stepped forward to the 2004 to 2006 era, but for this one, I want to take a step backwards again and go back to the RuneScape Classic days because there's so many interesting things left to talk about that I'm sure you guys are really going to enjoy, and you really old players are going to remember. So without further ado guys, let's get right into the video. How many of you remember when Edgeville was known as Ghost Town? Go ahead, raise your hands now. There's maybe 3 of you. That's because it was only ever named Ghost Town for the first 6 months of RuneScape's existence. You see, it was changed with the release of Wilderness on August 13th of 2001. Now, there's some really cool history behind Ghost Town. It was completely different at that time. It was really themed to be an abandoned town, and hence the name, but this was changed with the release of the Wilderness, and then with the release of RuneScape 2 into what it is now. But we do know what it looked like when it was this abandoned town. So at that time, the building containing men had no roof, and it was completely overrun by ferns on the inside. All the buildings had a much darker brick texture, and there was no bank whatsoever in Ghost Town that wasn't released until it was changed into Edgeville. However, the building for the bank did exist, the difference being that the entrance was on the east side instead of the north side as we know now. Also, as you know, at Edgeville there's actually a river that runs past it, the River Lum. When it was Ghost Town, that actually ran into an ocean because the wilderness, well, where the wilderness is now, that was actually the end of the map, and that was just a big flat ocean, so that river ran straight into that off of a cliff. Now, even when this was called Ghost Town, it was still an important place in the game because it housed one of the 2 dungeons. And the Edgeville dungeon was host to things like adamant ore, which was first mined by a player's shark. So although it was called a ghost town, it wasn't really a ghost town. There was still a reason for people to go there. This is one of those really cool pieces of RuneScape history that comes from the very early days of RuneScape. This one was discovered by a player that was actually being kind of malicious by de-orb focusing the code to the client way back in RuneScape Classic. And what he found is a model for a rune that didn't actually exist anywhere in the game. And on that rune was a little picture of a sun. So thus, for the longest time, this was known as the Sun Rune. Later, in 2007, with the release of a development diary for summoning, the summoning that is in RuneScape 3 today, Paul Gower spoke a little bit about this, and we learned that the real name for it was a life rune, and it was intended to be used with a subset of magic, which was going to be called summoning, but really it was going to be like necromancy skills, so not the summoning we know now, different, it was going to be a subset of magic. And that's what this life rune was going to be used in, and the life rune was actually fully coded, but there's just no way to get it in the game yet. However, unfortunately, due to game engine limits at that time, which we learned during a storytime telling recently actually that the Jagex team did on Twitch, featuring Ian Gower, this summoning magic subset was never released into the game, due to engine limits at the time. But they did have plans for it, so it would have been really cool in Classic actually, if you could have summoned like, I don't know, maybe a skeleton to help you fight things. Just interesting to think that that idea was there, but because of the limits at the time, they were unable to do it. And perhaps even cooler how players found this by maliciously de-orb focusing the code to the game. If you trained skills way back in the early day of RuneScape Classic, you're gonna remember this one because it was so tedious. So mining in the early days of Classic was a horrible experience. To start, the rocks did not change color whether there was an ore present or not. This meant that you had to prospect each ore before you mine it just to make sure that there was actually ore in the rock. Then, to further the pain, for every attempt that you made swinging on the rock, you would need to go to your inventory and use your pickaxe on the rock. Nowadays, and this came after the release of the fatigue system, when you click on a rock in RuneScape, you just start mining it and your character will swing at it until you actually get the rock. Didn't work like that in Classic. You would actually have to use your pickaxe on the rock for every hit that you attempt on the rock. So maybe you just got like level 15 mining and you want to go get some iron. You might need to use your pickaxe on that rock 20 times before you actually successfully get that ore. Really, this was Carpal Tunnel Simulator. And then you mix that in with the fact that a lot of people were using those ball mouses back at this time. Not fun whatsoever. So it's a good thing this was updated, and really I don't think RuneScape would be as successful as it is today if they never modified it and made it so it's less of a carpal tunnel simulator in those sorts of ways. I have been to one drop party on RuneScape Classic. I think sometime around 2009, a player was quitting, bunch of people came, whatever. The thing is that the party room in RuneScape Classic is much different than it is in modern day RuneScape. So for one, it's located in Sears Village. And there's no feature to like put items in a chest and then pull a lever and have them drop. Instead, players just walk around and drop items when they're having a drop party in the party room on RuneScape Classic. One of the interesting features is that it actually blocks the use of Telekinetic Grab. And this is important because Telekinetic Grab in RuneScape Classic is instant, unlike in modern day RuneScape. So if you use it on an item, you instantly get it. There's not that delay that gets rid of that unfair advantage in RuneScape today. Now, the party room wasn't actually moved to Falador until the release of the King's Ransom quest. So for a while in RuneScape 2, it actually did exist in Sears Village. Definitely a cool place, and probably once we get closer to the last days of RuneScape Classic, we might even see a few players hosting drop parties in the party room. So that will definitely be nostalgic to go back and experience. Ranged worked much different on RuneScape Classic. As a matter of fact, you could actually attack players or monsters that were already in combat, even in PvP. This allowed you to either team in PvP or kill steal in PvP, and it was quite commonplace to see players doing this. Another interesting thing is that Ranged gave no hit points experience. Instead, that extra experience just went straight into the skill. Now, one of the annoying things about training this skill is that if the monster could walk up to you, it would actually put you into combat and then you would no longer be able to do any ranging. Instead, it would force you to use some sort of combat stat like attack strength or defense to fight. So this meant if you want to train range, you really had to do it from a safe spot. There was no other way. Or you had to do it while somebody was already in combat with that monster. You know, this made a lot of PvM, well, the KBD, which was really the only big player versus monster back then, kind of unique in the way that one player could be fighting it at a time, so everybody else that was there had to be either using range or magic to actually attack it. And that's probably why this mechanic was present in the game. But nevertheless, I think it really should have been disabled for PvP at least, because really there was, a big issue with people kill stealing and teaming using ranging back then. I wonder if any of you guys did that using range back in the day. Let me know in the comment section below. I will be thoroughly impressed if anybody can comment below with proof that they have this item on RuneScape 3. So, released on the 12th of December of 2002 alongside the Agility skill and more prominently the Grand Tree quest, the warship has become one of the rarest items for anybody to have in RuneScape 3. It's speculated that there's only 500 accounts in the game that actually have the warship. That's rarer than Christmas crackers, that's rarer than party hats, that's rarer than any other rare in the game. So originally, the warship spawned in Glow's house, but that spawn was removed in 2004 with the transition between RuneScape Classic and RuneScape 2, and the item at that time was also made untradeable. Now, you can still get the item in RuneScape Classic if you ever want to have some fun and experience it, but to own the item in RuneScape 3 is so rare. And in RuneScape 3, you used to be able to drop the item and it would actually float above the ground, but that's now been changed to a destroy option which warns you won't be able to get it back. So one of the things that makes this item even rare is that Jagex made no mention to it when it was released. It was just kind of put into the game with the release of the Agility skill in this new quest. So for someone to kind of picked it up and kept it is really rare, because who would really know that it's there? And really the item doesn't do too much, and bank space was very valuable in RuneScape Classic. However, the few cheesy lines that it does say when you play with it are quite entertaining, but unfortunately that feature was removed in RuneScape 3. But unfortunately, from what I can tell, that feature was removed in RuneScape 3, so you can't actually play with it anymore. And when you examine it, it actually tells you that it is a model of the Crumb warship, which is a little bit interesting. I didn't know Crumb had warships. But on old school RuneScape, it's really less interesting because of course there was no transition from RuneScape Classic to old school RuneScape. So what Jagex ended up doing is with the release of the birthday events, you are able to obtain the warship. kind of neat, but really, I'm really interested to know if anybody actually has this in RuneScape 3, because that would be really crazy. And of course, you should never break RuneScape rules, but an interesting thing to note is that these accounts go on RuneScape black markets for a lot of money from what I've seen. Now, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to say thank you for 6,000 subscribers. It's crazy how fast my channel has been growing. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. There's plenty more coming. You know, I'm really dedicated to bringing these videos out. Today I went to school, then I went to work, then I came home, finished 2 assignments, and then started recording the audio for this video. It's currently 5 in the morning. I have school in 2.5 hours, so I'm gonna end up going to that, coming home, editing the video, and putting it out. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, love, peace, and chicken grease.